Welcome to Last Word on Rugby, presented by Sport, your ultimate rugby fix with a South African twist. From the Springboks' latest triumphs on the biggest stage to battles in the Champions Cup and the United Rugby Championship for the local franchises. Whether it's discussing our national heroes, key moments in the games, or the rising stars on the horizon, we've got it all covered. Tune in as we break down the stories that matter to every South African rugby fan. This is Last Word on Rugby. Today we're going to chat a bit more on the Champions Cup, the progress or the non-progress that the South African franchise has made, and a bit of the URC as it returns after that bout of Champions Cup matches. On the line with me today, we have two of South Africa's top rugby scribes in Ashfaq Mohammed and Mike Greenaway. Guys, you've been in the game very long. You've seen it all from Super Rugby when it was in its infant stages, and now we are with a Champions Cup, a European tournament where the South African teams are playing a part in, and then the United Rugby Championship. Just welcome, firstly. It's good to have you. And I look forward to hear your insights on what's been happening in the Champions Cup for the three different teams that we have there, and the Challenge Cup with the Lions and Cheetahs, and then also just what we can expect from the URC as it resumes. Ashfaq, if I can ask you just to say a little something about yourself. Mike, if you can follow, then we can kick things off after that.
Good morning, Leighton and Mike. Yeah, I hope you're not trying to give our ages away, Leighton. Mike and I, we have been around quite a while. Mike is, of course, a senior man as well in rugby circles. So, yeah, no, great to be here and having a chat about rugby.
Yeah, how's it, Lisa and Nash? Yeah, dare I say it, but this year marks my 30th anniversary of writing rugby
Wow.
for independent media.
Wow.
Yeah, so yes, I have been have been around a while.
Yeah.
And that means you've seen it all, Ash, you've seen it all, and we've seen how the Champions Cup has been going for the South African side. Dare I say a terrible, terrible season. No playoffs for any of the three teams who played in the tournament. What do we make of that? Are we really playing our part in the tournament, Ashfaq?
Yeah, really disappointing Champions Cup campaign for our teams, because especially after last season, where the Bulls made the quarterfinals, Stormers also made the round of 16. You'd have thought that they would have kicked on from there, knowing what to expect now when playing away from home, juggling the various tournaments. It's a difficult task because you've got the Springboks who are playing essentially still on the Southern Hemisphere sort of
Yeah.
calendar, and then our franchises are playing on the Northern Hemisphere calendar. So, some of the top box, as Jake White said recently about at the Bulls, someone like Kanan Moody or was on tour for 9 weeks in total in Europe towards the end of last season because he was on tour with the Bulls, then went with the Springboks with a pre-tour camp in Jersey and then on the Bok tour. And then when the Bulls came back, he just stayed on in Europe because they had another 2 weeks on tour. So, that kind of juggling is really difficult. But I just feel that maybe we didn't manage, that each team didn't manage their resources optimally. There's still this thing about is the URC should be the main
Yeah.
focus, or should each team plow all their resources into Champions Cup and make sure that they qualify for the playoffs there? So that's a difficult conundrum facing all our teams.
Mike, and if I can come to you, we know the teams are saying that, well, South African teams, we don't have the player budget that the European teams have. I know up in Durban, down here in the Cape, injuries have plagued both sides, and Springboks are out for long term. Do you think that can be held up as an excuse for the poor performances, or do we need to look past that?
Look, what's happened in the Champions Cup with us being non-representative is really a reflection on how stressed our resources are in South Africa. Um, I mean, we're looking at playing 52 weeks of the year, and we only got a certain amount of players in the country. And when certain teams have major injury calamities, like the Sharks, for instance, it's really difficult to be able to focus week in, week out on a specific tournament. At some stage, coaches have to target games, and it shouldn't be that way. We should be trying to win every single tournament, but it's just not possible. I do feel that what is happening with South African rugby is we're trying to play the URC, we're trying to play the Challenge Cup, we're trying to play the Champions Cup with players based in South Africa when many of our top players are actually based in Japan and in Europe. So, for instance, you play against a Toulouse side or you play against Bordeaux, and they are at absolute full strength. They have got all their French national players. They've got players from who represent Samoa, Tonga, England, you name it. So, for instance, that Sharks team that played against Bordeaux, that was more or less a Sharks Currie Cup strength side playing against a complete international strength side. And when you line those stars up, you're going to have a possible hiding, and that's what's happened. So over the course of a year, it's really difficult for our franchises to be at full strength for every game, for every tournament.
Yeah. Ashim, you wrote a nice piece on for the independent newspapers on changing that thought of the URC must be our focus. When do we decide that the Champions Cup will be our focus? Do you feel if and when the Stormers, the Bulls, the Sharks, the Lions look primed to qualify in that top eight of the URC, is it time to look at we are focusing on the Champions Cup now and shift the URC on the back foot like it's been in the Champions Cup?
Yeah, I really think that we should reach that point now. I know it's still a juggling act. Jake quite often speaks about it, John Dobson also, Plum as well. We always want our top box, as Mike said. Many of the top Springboks are playing for overseas teams, but with the resources that they do have in the current team, I still feel that, yes, the Boks are away for Rugby Championship in August and September as well. But I just feel maybe during that window before the end of year Springbok tour that the Boks shouldn't participate in the URC at all. If they can given that block of 2 or 3 weeks off. I know some of them do get off, but others also play if they may be fringe players in the box setup. But if you just give them a total break at that time and withdraw them from URC action, because the Champions Cup really starts the first weekend in December or the
Yeah,
second weekend in December. And then it's, between December and January across that time where the full pool games are played. So if you have your best team after that, with the Springbok tour normally being in November, usually 3 tests, sometimes four. And then when the players, and those top players then return to their franchises because they hadn't played the URC early in the season, they will have a bit more in their legs. Whereas now
yeah,
they're playing those few URC games as well. Then on the Springbok tour, as I mentioned, kind of Moody example, but the others are there as well. So then by the time they come back to their franchises after the Springbok tour, they virtually spent. I mean, a poor guy like Oxenchair, Mike, at the Sharks,
mm,
um, he even had to come on off the bench last week. I'm sure Plum and everybody else would have wanted to give him a break because he just played so much rugby and he's got nothing left in the tank. Now it's almost like a difficult reflection on him because, he's maybe not as sharp as he normally is and powerful, but he's such a great player and sort of he's not being helped. I mean, we know the concerns around Eben Etzebeth. He's had multiple injuries as well,
Mm.
and Pam spoke about that previously. So we've just got to be box clever a bit because I feel in the URC you can catch up later in the season, as the Stormers did in the
definitely
first
yes.
season. They were virtually nowhere by the end of that year or December, and then they managed to get onto a run because you tend to have more home games from
Yeah.
February onwards. So you can still catch up in your URC, but I think with the Champions Cup, if you want to give it a proper go, you need to ensure that your best possible team, whoever they are, you may not have all the top box from overseas here, but the box that you do have and your best players must be in optimum shape for that Champions Cup pool stages so that you qualify top of your group and then can host a round of 16 and quarterfinal.
Yeah, if I can just come in there, Leeton. Yeah, look, as in an ideal world, we have our best players available as often as we can, and we have to try and box more clever because our situation could not be more contrasting to that of our main opponents.
Yeah.
Like the New Zealand and Australian players, for instance, they have like 3 or 4 months off. They have a complete off season. When they finish their NPC or whatever the Australian equivalent is, they are then off from basically November to February when Super Rugby starts again. So that gives their players opportunities to do their conditioning and just to have that mental break from rugby. And the European teams are exactly the same. When we are having the Rugby Championship, um, the players that we play against in the URC and the Champions and Challenge Cup, they then have off after the Six Nations. So they have three months as well, completely off. But our players do not have an off season. So that's why we have coaches having no alternative but to target specific competitions at specific times, and it really is difficult for them because our players, unlike the European players and unlike the Australian and New Zealand players, our players are committed for 52 weeks of the year. So yeah, at some stage, and I'll give you a great example. The Sharks last year were atrocious in their URC. They had so many players missing, and they were still finding their feet under John Plumtree. And then they managed to find a competition they could focus on, which was the Challenge Cup, and they put all their resources into that. And they sacrificed URC points by resting players for certain URC games, and they targeted the Challenge Cup, and they won it. So that's kind of the problem facing our coaches. You at some stage you've got to decide what are you going to target. Yeah.
No, I fully agree there, Mike, because that's what I'm saying. The Champions Cup is almost like in football, you have the Champions League. It's a holy grail. It's the
Yeah.
most important competition, and if you like the Sharks proved in the Challenge Cup, if you have your best possible team in the Champions Cup, as tough as it is, and we know, as you said now, the French and English, they can rest their players because they have a proper off season, so they are fully loaded, and they have these other internationals from other countries also in their club sides. So they are really powerful. But I think that in South African rugby, we can still mount a serious challenge for Champions Cup if we have that focus. I still
Yeah,
feel
we've got
that
to focus
URC you
on that.
can catch up here and there.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there, Ashim. It's definitely time for John Dobson, Jake White, John Plumtree, Cash van Rooyen, if they make it, if the four franchises make the top eight of the URC at the end of May, it's time for them to just sit down with their bosses, tell them, listen, we've had a couple of seasons in the Champions Cup. We fared well for some of it, but we didn't do too great this past season. So let's try and focus with our strongest side week in, week out for that 4 weeks of group stage games. We field them, we play, and we try to top our pools, which means Champions Cup, a home playoff. If you progress through the stages, URC, like you said, there's always scope to catch up. You can catch a few teams unawares, especially towards the end of Jan, Feb. The Irish, Scottish teams losing some of their top players due to the Six Nations. So there's scope for you to catch up once you've progressed safely through the pool stages, because it is becoming a problem when you hear overseas. Yeah, the South African teams, they do not belong in the
Hey, I'm
European.
tired of that
Yeah,
moaning, hey, Vincent and Mike.
exactly. I am tired, and it's especially from the English side of English and French sides of rugby, because they know how strong we can be, and how strong South African rugby and the franchises as well could become if we get that footing in European professional club rugby, and we do have the resources to send our strong teams. So those guys, the pundits and all, they want the South Africans out because
Yeah.
they know the strength that the South African franchises can possibly become if they do get that foothold there. If we can move on, we've sat on the Champions Cup, and I think we all agree where we are with that opinion on our progress there. It's the return of the URC this weekend, after a disappointing exit from the main European tournament. There's still Challenge Cup bouts for three of our franchises. But just to return to URC rugby, what can we expect? First up, Ashfaq, you are very invested and vested in this Yuxkay Derby coming up. And both sides are fantastic rugby. I think they've been the top two sides in terms of entertaining people on the field.
Yeah, it's a clash of contrasting styles also because I think the Lions, we know how the Lions play all out attack. They're gonna spread the ball wide. They're gonna test you, on the fringe, on the flanks, and just have a full go at you. Where the Bulls is a mixture of the two. They've got the attacking game, but they can also play a tactical game with their
Yeah,
box kicks and kicks downfield, looking for territory as well. So I feel the Lions are probably in better form at the moment, the way they're going. And yes, it's not only the 60 points they scored against the Dragons, but just that the rhythm seems to be there already. The Bulls came over a difficult period, 4 defeats in a row across competitions, but they got over the line last week against Stade Francais. It wasn't the greatest Stade Francais team, but at least the Bulls got 48 points and also seemed to get the attacking shape back again, which I felt was a bit lost for a while there. So in terms of that, the Bulls getting to the best, I think the Lions are firing at the moment. uh, I feel the Lions are maybe slight favorites because it's at Ellis Park as well. They're going to try and play that up tempo, force the Bulls to speed up their game as well. Whereas I think for the Bulls, for them to emerge victorious, they need to be a bit more measured, play a bit more percentage, and not get caught up in the Lions' helter-skelter kind of approach.
that's going to be
So it's going to
important.
be a great matchup, yes.
Mike, your thoughts on that clash? I know you will be focused more overseas, but just quickly your thoughts on that clash.
Yeah, and I'm with the Lions. I think they're playing an enterprising brand of rugby. Yeah, I just feel I like Sam Francis. If I can just maybe bring a little bit of a curveball in here, I think that guy at fly half is really someone that excites me. He reminds me a little bit of Henry Honeyball, and he's tall, angular. He takes the ball to the line. Um, I quite like him. I think there could be some future prospects for him there. Yeah, so I do think the Lions possibly could edge that one. But the game that I'm really obviously concentrated on is is that Sharks trip to Cardiff. If I can go move on to that, you know, John Plumtree, he sent audio this week, and it sounds like the man is approaching almost a nervous breakdown there. You know, they had 15 injuries before the Bordeaux game, and now they've got
Yeah.
another 4.
Yeah.
Corne Roll got stretchered off, concussed. Lorenzo Julius, who's a real phenomenon, a rising star, also injured, and also Kaneni, the fullback. I think he's probably going to be suspended for he's having his hearing this week for
Yeah.
that head
Head
on head
contact.
tackle. So they're really struggling. So yeah, look.
But surely they
What
can beat
helps?
Cardiff, Mike, man. Come on.
Yeah,
Look, the
and do
one,
the rest of the South African franchises a favor by
yeah,
toppling that. They can do that.
and what helps is that there are 8 Cardiff players unavailable for this game because they're going into Wales's Six Nations squad. So yeah, even a, how can I put it, severely undernourished Sharks team, you would think they can beat Cardiff when they've got half their team out as well. But yeah, big week for the Sharks because they really need to make a statement this week after a 66-point humiliation. I had a look at the social media, the Facebook comments. Oh
Yeah.
my word, it's been very harsh. Yeah, but yeah, that's how rugby is. You know, you lose by 66 points, your fans are going to call you out. So the Sharks need to make a statement this week. They need to.
They do,
Are they
yes.
going to
They do.
roll over and collapse, or are they going to go to Cardiff and win? So a massive week for the Sharks. Either way, they've got to do something. They've got to have a
Yeah.
response.
So same goes for the Stormers over in Leinster. I know it's a tricky match for them. They're playing the second best side in the URC because Leinster's A team is part of the Irish Six Nation squad. So they say Leinster B is the second best team then. But yeah, it's gonna be tricky for John Dobson and his men. He's rested a couple of guys, but hopefully they can pick up from that winning momentum they collected against the Sharks and the Lions back here in South Africa. Guys, before we end off, just it's 2025, a new year. We're done with the first month. What do you sort of see the prospects for the different franchises over the next couple of months, building towards possibly that playoffs in the URC? What are your wishes for the 4 sides that's currently playing in the URC?
Yeah, if I may, with the Bulls, first of all, they're battling at fly off a bit. Johan Goosen went down again
Sure.
last week. Boeta Chamberlain has done well. I feel since he's left the Sharks, I know he had a difficult time there, Mike, at the Sharks, but I feel he stepped up quite well for the Bulls and played some nice, added some nice width to the attack. But still, he's not a Springbok. He hasn't really won tournaments previously, so it's a growth period for him as well. So I think if the Bulls can sort of manage that situation in terms of making Buta's life easier and whoever else. I mean, Jake has mentioned even Willie Leroux might help out at fly-off as well. They've also got Keegan Johannes, who's normally a scrum off, can fill in there too. But I think the rest of the team, really need to support whoever's at fly-off by providing options on attack, helping out on defense, and Emrys Papiro will be critical. He's been excellent the last few years, and I really think he's knocking on the Springbok door once again. If you can get a look in there,
Definitely, yes.
his box kicking has really been superb, and we know his pace around the fringes. He can snipe and break the line. So if they can bring that sort of playmaking situation under control, I think they've got enough firepower to again contend for the URC title.
Yeah, looking at the Sharks, Elton, I can tell you now, and I'm going to make a bold proclamation here: the Sharks will win the Challenge Cup. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier about stressed resources and coaches having to target certain competitions. And the Sharks now are in exactly the same situation as they were last year, where they were out of the URC and then they targeted the Challenge Cup. Well, now they're out of the Champions Cup and they've got 15 to 19 players who are going to come back probably almost simultaneously.
Okay.
And my feeling is that the Sharks are going to suddenly come into rich resources. They're going to target the Challenge Cup and the URC. They're going to have a flood of players coming back. As John Plumtree said earlier in the week, I'm in a holding pattern. I'm just trying to do as best I can with what I've got. And when I get bodies back, we can mount serious campaigns. And I think that is going to happen with the Sharks. Mark my word, I'm here on record. I'm saying the Sharks will win the Challenge Cup because they will suddenly have a flood of players back. And, you know, it is a second tier competition. And when the Sharks are at full strength, as all their Springboks, all the Earbins, and all the rest of them come back, they will be hard to stop. And I think they'll win. I think they'll win the Challenge Cup. Yeah, you heard it
They've
here
got the
first.
they've got the blueprint from last
Yeah,
season, of course.
they do, they do. I think the Lions will want to have a word with you, Mike.
No, sure, and hopefully they
They
do.
yeah, they up there. I feel they're gonna push on to go very high up in the URC as
Yeah,
well. It's been lovely to watch them producing Springboks again, and I feel they're coming into their own at the moment. Down here in Cape Town, injuries as well. Key injuries to key players. That's the trouble here in Cape Town. Hopefully, when Sasha Feinberg and Ngomezulu comes back, it's going to look a bit better. There's still a time to go for Damian Willemse. But then again, we've been surprised before by the tenacity of the South African sides in the URC and then in the Challenge Cup, like you mentioned, the Sharks going on to win it. Guys, no, I just want to say thank you for joining again. It's been a pleasure talking to you. We are going to do this weekly when you are available. So thanks again for joining in. Thank you for listening. This has been Last Word on Rugby, the podcast brought to you by Indie Sport. We'll be back weekly to discuss everything South African rugby.
Cheers.
cheers.